Hello, everybody. Welcome to an author interview with Mardel. My name is Jay DePalmo, the CEO of Mardel, and I'm here with Lee Strobel, and I'm so excited to have Lee with us today.
Hey.
He's written a new book, but hey, in the book right here is called Seeing the Supernatural, which if you just click over, you can actually go to our website and pick up that book, have it shipped directly to your house, so feel free to click over. But before we talk about your new book, I was interested in maybe just having you just share with the audience, maybe people have heard of you, they've heard of your books, but you know, you've got a backstory too, how you got saved and your author. I just wondered if maybe you could just share everybody a little bit about Lee and your background.
Yeah, I was an atheist for much of my life. My background's in journalism and law, so I tend to be a very empirical, analytical kind of individual. I just thought the idea of God was absurd on the surface of it. It wasn't worth my time to check out. My wife was kind of, I call her agnostic. I don't know if that's accurate. She just couldn't put the puzzle pieces together. And then she met a neighbor who was a Christian who shared the gospel with her. And unless she put the puzzle pieces together, she came to faith. And I thought, oh no, what do I do now? You know, I've got to rescue her from this cult that she's gotten involved in. So how do I do that? Well, I could disprove the resurrection of Jesus because that's the linchpin. Even I recognize that as an atheist. That's the foundation of the Christian faith. So I ended up spending 2 years of my life using my journalism training and legal training to systematically investigate. Is there any credibility to Jesus returning from the dead and thus proving that he is who he claimed to be, the unique Son of God? And it finally culminated on November the 8th of 1981 when I realized, in light of this avalanche of evidence that points so powerfully toward the truth of Christianity, it would have required more faith to maintain my atheism than to become a Christian. And that's when I realized that Jesus is who he claimed to be, and received him as my forgiver and leader, and my life began to change. My values, my character, my purpose, my parenting, my relationships, my marriage, I mean, all these things over time began to change for the good.
Oh, that's fantastic. You know, in reading your books like The Case for Christ and those books like that, you know, and as you just explained it, you've gone out and you've kind of created or had to create a case.
Yeah,
basically
exactly.
Doing an investigative.
Yeah.
So how does that process work? I mean, in your different subjects, maybe just share a little bit of.
Yeah, you know, I've written over 40 books, and I don't have to be the world's leading expert on all these topics. I'm a journalist by training.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I seek out leading experts in these areas, including atheists. I've interviewed atheists and agnostics as well, skeptics. But I go out and I find people who seem to be able to give solid, defensible, corroborated responses to the questions of faith. And so that's taken me all around, and I've got to interview some fascinating individuals, including people like Bruce Metzger, who was the #1 expert on the Greek New Testament in the 20th century, and people like that, brilliant scholars with PhDs from Cambridge and Oxford and major universities around the world. And then my job as a journalist is to try to communicate this technical stuff that they've developed in everyday language that I can understand, because I figure if I get it, anybody can get it. Right. So I try to put that into language that people will be able to relate to and put into practice in their own life. So that's been kind of the motif that I've used in my books. And what I like about it is I get to meet some fascinating people. I get to ferret out really good answers to tough questions and to build a case for the reliability of the Bible and the truth of Christianity.
Wow, that's fantastic. It's got to be amazing interviewing all these
Oh
kind
my
of people,
gosh,
right?
yeah. And some of these interviews take days. You know, I'll spend, and now of course I condense it down for the book. Some of them I do a transcript and it's 70,000 words. It's just bigger than most books. So I have to condense it down into something that's accessible by everyday folks.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I just got through hearing you speak about your new book, about the supernatural. And so this is obviously just released, just a few days ago, you said?
Yeah, it's already on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, so how did this book come about? What kind of got you going this direction?
I was chatting about it with my publisher, and we realized that there's been an interesting trend in recent years that the percentage of Americans who believe in God, heaven, hell, angels, demons, Satan, has actually decreased by double digits digits since the year 2001, according to Gallup. So, and yet there still is a substantial percentage of Americans who believe in God, who believe in an afterlife and so forth. But there's a lot of people have some really wacky ideas about the paranormal. And so we thought, why don't we use this as a way to help people who are curious about the supernatural to find some biblically supported material that they can really rely on and trust on. And what is the corroborated evidence that indeed there is something beyond what we can see, touch, and put in a test tube? We live in a scientific age, and but people don't realize if you say the sentence that says science is the only arbiter of truth, which a lot of people believe. Wait a minute, that sentence itself is not scientific. You can't test that by the scientific method. That's a philosophical sentence, and so it's self-refuting. It's like saying every English sentence has 3 words in it. Well, that's a self-refuting thing. So science can only take us so far. There's other evidence of history and so forth, that philosophy and so forth, that can take us to conclusions that we can really have confidence are true. And so I try to look at cases peering into the supernatural where there's corroboration, where there's strong evidence. And I think people who read the book will walk away, who are Christians, will walk away really with their faith strengthened and deepened, perhaps. And my hope is that they then give the book away to someone who's spiritually curious, someone who's spiritually confused, someone who's reading all kinds of wacky stuff about the supernatural realm, to try to give them something that can lead them toward something solid and biblical.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I got from your presentation this morning was that you put them into different categories.
Yes.
There were different types or different groups of things that you studied in the book.
Yes.
Maybe you just share that real quick with our audience.
Yeah, I mean, one area that I studied are supernatural miracles. Again, I didn't look at cases that you read about on the internet and have no sources and so forth. I was looking at cases that have been published as case studies in medical journals that have been documented by medical researchers. And so this morning I told a story about a woman who was blind for 12 years with an incurable condition. She went to a school for the blind, she read Braille, she walked with a white cane, and she married a Baptist pastor. And one night, they were getting ready for bed. She's in bed, he comes over and he begins to cry, and he puts his hand on her shoulder and begins to pray. He says, Lord, I know you can heal my wife. I know you can do that, and I pray you'll do it right now. I pray you do it tonight. And she opened her eyes to perfect eyesight. And her eyesight has now remained, it's been 47 years, and her eyesight is good. So what do you do with that? She said, I have a quote from her where she says, I was blind when my husband prayed for me, and then I opened my eyes and I can see perfectly. So it was a miracle. And I don't know how you explain something like that, other than it's a supernatural intervention of God, unless you rule that out at the outset. Because some people will say, miracles are impossible, now bring me your evidence. Well, wait a minute. I think miracles are possible. They're not impossible, they're possible. Therefore, here's the evidence. What does this tell you? A lot of people misunderstand miracles. They think a miracle says that God has, that there's been a violation of natural law. And they say that's impossible. You can't violate natural law. And so miracles are not possible. Well, if I had this book and I picked it up and I dropped it, the law of gravity said it would hit the floor. But if I drop that book and you reach over and pick it out of air before it hits the ground, you're not violating the law of nature. You're not contravening the laws of nature. You're merely intervening. And if God is real, and we have good evidence that he is, then it would make sense that he could intervene in the creation he himself created and the laws of nature that he himself put into place. So miracles are not impossible. And I think they're good evidence, especially when you look at the scientific studies that have been done of miracles, that something supernatural really is going on.
That's amazing. And of course, miracles is just one group.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was absolutely fascinating, I wrote this down, I'm remembering it, was when you were talking about those people that were having vision before death.
Yes.
And you gave a stat like 88% of people in this study were having a vision before they died. Maybe you could just share that.
That's right. We see in the book of Acts, in chapter 7, we see the story of Stephen, who it describes Stephen as being full of the Holy Spirit, who is just about to be stoned to death. And he has a pre-death vision where he sees the heavens open up, and he sees the Father and the Son together. Well, people have pre-death visions. These are people on the verge of dying, and they have a supernatural vision. Now, a lot of people who have that experience are afraid to talk about it because they think the doctor's going to think my drugs are whacked out or I've got dementia, so they don't like to talk about it. So researchers went to a huge hospice facility in New York State, and they told the dying people there, they said, look, if you have a supernatural type of vision, a dream that's more vivid than anything you've ever had, tell us about it. We would like to know. Well, 88% of them reported a pre-death vision. And I think the other 12% may have had one, but they died before they were able to talk about it. So these are incredibly common. One of the reasons we know they're authentic is sometimes people will see someone in the realm to come who they didn't know had already died. So there was a woman who was in England. Her name was Doris. She was on her deathbed. Well-documented case where she sees the next realm. She sees the heavens opening up. She sees angelic figures, and she sees her father, who had died several years earlier, as if he's welcoming her to the next realm. And then she gets a puzzled look on her face, and she says, well, wait a minute. Why is Vida with my father? What's Vida doing there? Why is Vida there? It doesn't make sense. And then she died. Well, Vida was her sister, and her sister had died a couple of weeks earlier, but nobody had told Doris because she was so ill they didn't want to kill her with the shock. So they withheld that information. And yet, in this pre-death vision, she saw her deceased sister in the world to come. That, to me, is a form of corroboration. And the frequency of this, I think, is another form of corroboration, because if it were a rare experience, and it happened once in a blue moon, then a skeptic would say, well, you know, we have billions of people who die over time. There's going to be some weird anomalies, and so they write it off. But because these are so common, I don't think you can write them off that way. In fact, I'd encourage anybody who's watching, next time your family gets together for Easter or Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever, bring up this topic if you have an extended family there and see if anybody has a story. I was at dinner just last night, and there were 7 people at dinner, and there were 3 of these deathbed visions that people knew about in their families. Just these 2 of them had a total of 3 of these visions that relatives of theirs have had before they died. One saw angels coming for them to take them to the realm to come, which is very common and biblical, according to Luke 16, verse 22. So it's a fascinating, and these are consistent with Scripture. These pre-death visions. I mentioned the Stephen story, and there are about 47 points of correspondence between the Bible and these pre-death visions and near-death experiences.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You know, it takes me back to even my wife's grandfather when he passed away in the hospital. Now, he didn't tell us he had a vision per se, but I remember him saying, "What's that sweet smell?" Like he could smell it.
Yes.
The other, you know what I mean?
That's not uncommon.
And we always remembered that.
Yeah.
And I told my wife at the time, he's seeing the other side.
Yeah.
You know what I
We
mean?
even have a case of the Anderson family in suburban Atlanta where they had one of the members of the family was dying, and several of them who were present saw almost a cloud form, an archway, and the spirit of the mother who was dying going through that archway. And they said there was a sense of joy and peace around that archway. That's an unusual, but the Bible says our spirit, our soul separates from our physical body at the time of death. So that's biblical to have that experience. Unusual to have witnesses other than the person who's dying who can document something like that.
Well, I'll tell you, you've whet my appetite. I want to read this book, and I think you do too. So just click on over to our website and get this book and order it. I think it'll be a real blessing to you and Lee. So what's next for Lee? I mean, what's next? Do you have another book on the horizon?
I do. I have a new book coming out in the fall. It's called The Case for Christmas.
Okay.
And I actually wrote a book by that title about 25 years ago. But I wanted to redo it, and I've completely rewritten it, completely redone it. There's new research that's been done into the incarnation and into the facts surrounding the birth of Jesus, why Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem and so forth. A lot of people said Luke got it wrong in his gospel. The timing was wrong of the census, but no, it turns out he was right.
Yep.
And I document that. So I'm excited about that because we've kept the price low so that people can give it away to friends and relatives who may be spiritually curious at Christmas time.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. So
Thank you.
Well, Lee, thank you so much for stopping
Yeah,
by.
I've
I
enjoyed
really
it.
appreciated getting to chat with you and getting to share with our
My
folks
pleasure.
out there. It was really good meeting you and
Thank you.
spending some time
Love
with you.
Mardel. Love
Yeah.
Mardel. Love Hobby Lobby. Just great people who do great work.
Yeah. Well, one of these times we'll have to get you back in one of our stores. I'm sure our
Yeah.
customers would love to have that.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be awesome. I'd love
yeah.
to do that.
So
Yeah.
anyway, well, thank you so much for joining us, and you have a very blessed day.